They told me what I was allowed to think, read, say, and I believed it was for my good. This is my nightly ritual again, the fire, the bourbon, and the kind of silence where I hear my thoughts, a little too clearly or loudly. I stare into the flames, listen to them crack and spit, and replay everything that happened. And the only thought that won't let go of me is, how could I have believed that? I suppose I should have gone to a priest. But the truth is, I doubt any priest would want to hear all the things I've done. This fire, it's the only witness that doesn't look away. Before I tell you about the hardest period of my life, allow me to ask one thing. Please like the video and subscribe, but only if this confession truly resonates with you. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It means something to me, knowing who I'm opening my soul to tonight. The first time he told me what to eat, it was blueberries. That detail always sticks with me. It wasn't dramatic or ritualistic or strange. It was breakfast. Simple. I had just come into the dining space, still foggy from morning chant, and I stood there staring at the options. Boiled grain, overripe fruit, something pale and gelatinous I couldn't identify. I hesitated. He stepped up beside me, glanced at the bowls, and said, softly, without pause, "Blueberries. They'll sit lighter this morning." I didn't ask why, I just nodded, took the bowl, sat where he pointed, ate them slowly. And what surprised me, more than his confidence, more than my obedience, was the relief. It felt good to not choose. That should have scared me, but it didn't. It felt safe. When I finished eating, I waited a moment, not for conversation, not for approval, just waited. And sure enough, he nodded toward the south doorway. So I stood and walked through it. I didn't realize at the time that I'd just passed my first test. Or maybe I had issued it myself. And he had passed. In the days that followed, small choices began to dissolve. Wake-up time was no longer something I managed. He'd knock at the same rhythm each dawn. 3 slow taps, pause, then 1. He never entered, never raised his voice, just the knock. If I wasn't up before the final tap, the day started wrong. I felt it in my chest. Not guilt, but disorder. Like a glass had cracked somewhere I couldn't see. One morning, I opened my eyes and caught myself thinking, I hope he tells me what task to take today. And when he did, when he looked across the meditation circle and said simply, "Courtyard, the benches need scrubbing," I felt calm wash over me like warm water. It was becoming a pattern. He anticipated the choice before it reached me. And somehow, every time, I agreed. At first, I believed this was trust, or maybe submission. But now, years later, I realize it was something stranger. I was learning to forget how to want. The shift was gradual. He never said, "I'll decide your life now." It was more like a gentle tilt in the floorboards, and before I knew it, my thoughts had begun to roll toward him. One afternoon, I sat beneath the olive trees writing in my small blank booklet. We were told we could write only what was true, but I kept pausing, wondering, is this feeling mine, or something left over from before? When I showed him the page, not for review, just because I wanted to share, he didn't smile. He didn't even sit. He read one sentence. I missed the feeling of deciding what to do with my day, and asked quietly, "Is that your thought, or thought trying to survive?" I didn't answer. I just felt my throat tighten. He touched the page once, then closed the book. From that day on, I stopped writing about what I missed. Soon, I began to bring him my uncertainties like a child brings broken toys to a parent. A moment of hesitation during a lecture. a flicker of resistance in my gut when asked to fast longer than the others, a dream that didn't fit the narrative we were taught. Every time he would listen in silence, then ask something like, "What would the group think of that feeling?" Or, "Do you want that?" Or, "Does your old self want it for you?" And every time I'd nod, he was right. Eventually, I stopped coming to him with these doubts, because I'd already started answering myself the way he would. I had internalized his voice. That's how it begins, you know, not with rules, with echoes. The moment I realized I was waiting for his permission to feel anything, I was watching a woman cry. She wasn't loud, it wasn't spectacle, just silent tears during a reading. Others sat still, their faces blank. But I felt something, sharp, familiar, grief. I glanced toward him just to see his expression, to know if what I was feeling was acceptable. He wasn't even looking at me, but I didn't need the glance. The thought had already passed through the filter, and what was left wasn't grief. It was shame, not because she was crying, but because I had reacted before checking if I was ready to. That night, as we lit our individual candles in silence, I whispered to my flame, "Decide for me. Tell me what to feel." And the frightening part is, I meant it, with everything I had left. Some people think control is a cage, a heavy locked thing, obvious, loud, violent. But the kind I lived inside wasn't like that. It was soft, gentle, almost invisible. It came in the form of questions, subtle ones. Are you sure you're ready for that? Do you feel clear enough to hear this right now? Maybe wait until your ego softens, then revisit. And I'd nod every time, because they made it sound like care. I didn't realize those questions were gates, that every time I stepped back I gave them more keys, until eventually the only door I could open was the one they pointed to. One morning, I was assigned to clean the recording hall. It was just me and the dust. Wooden benches, thick silence. I liked it in there. The space felt taller, the air cooler. On a shelf by the altar was a stack of teaching tapes. Old ones, dozens I hadn't heard. I felt curious, just a little. I remember staring at one label. It said something vague, something like liberation from patterned desire. I reached for it, then froze, because a voice in my head, not angry, not panicked, just firm, whispered, "Not yet." It wasn't my voice. It was his. Or maybe it was mine now, shaped like his. I stood there, hand hovering over the cassette, and realized I didn't actually want to hear it. I just wanted to know if I was allowed to, and since I wasn't sure, I left it alone. That moment was small. No one saw it. No one corrected me, but something deep inside clicked. Curiosity isn't a virtue here, it's a temptation, and I had learned to resist temptation. Later that week, during our shared meal, he sat across from me. Usually, we didn't talk during meals. It was part of the practice. But that evening, he looked at my plate and said, "I think today you'd feel better without the lentils." And just like that, I put them aside. No question, no thought. Not because I don't like lentils, but because the moment he said it, I believed it. Or rather, I needed it to be true. Because if I started doubting these small things, the whole house would shake. Eventually, I stopped using the word want. It sounded self-indulgent. Instead, we were taught to say, I moved toward, I'm open to, I sense alignment with. That language, it did something. It stripped the spine out of my sentences. And soon, even inside my head, my voice grew softer, more obedient. I began to doubt spontaneous reactions. Like once, during a teaching, the speaker said something that made me want to laugh. Not mockingly, just genuine joy. It bubbled up from nowhere. But as it reached my chest, I caught it, held it, checked it. Was it appropriate? Was it aligned? Was it mine? By the time I finished auditing the emotion, the moment had passed, and all that was left was silence. That became normal. He once told me, "True stillness is when you don't even react internally without invitation." At the time, I thought that was beautiful. Now, I'm not so sure, but back then, I started practicing it. When someone cried, I checked first. When someone failed, I looked for his eyes. When a bird flew into the hall and people gasped, I waited. If he smiled, I smiled. If he looked down, I followed. That was what safety felt like. Not knowing what to do, but knowing who to look at. Eventually, I stopped noticing how often I deferred. It became instinct. We were standing in a circle one morning, preparing for a collective reflection. Each person would share a felt truth, something short, honest. But as my turn approached, my chest tightened. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't know if what I wanted to say was appropriate. I glanced at him. He gave me a subtle nod, nothing more. And in that instant, I decided what I felt. I said it calmly, with conviction. I even believed it. Only later did I wonder, was that really what I felt? Or just what I knew he'd agree with? The more I asked myself that, the less I trusted the answers. But here's the twist. I didn't mind. In fact, it was a relief. The world outside had always demanded choices. Constant, endless. What to believe, who to trust, what to fear, what to pursue. Here, I didn't have to choose, not even my thoughts. They would do it for me, and I would feel protected, because once someone else holds the compass, you stop getting lost. You just walk, quietly, gratefully, until the compass becomes your bones, and you forget there was ever a direction you chose on your own. I think the first real shift, the one I didn't even notice until much later, was the day I didn't open my notebook. I had carried it every day. Not for writing my thoughts, I had already stopped doing that, but as a kind of placeholder, a symbol that I could still reflect if I needed to, if I chose to. But that morning, I left it on my mat, and I didn't feel anxious. I felt free. I didn't need to write anything down, because I already knew what was right to feel, and if I didn't, someone would tell me. What was there left to record? The next phase came quietly, like most things there. During one of the morning assemblies, I had been struggling with sleep the night before, tossing, thinking, maybe even dreaming. I couldn't tell any more what was thought and what was memory. My mind was muddy. As I took my spot in the circle, one of the speakers began the lesson. And before the first paragraph was finished, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. I looked up. It was him. He didn't smile, just leaned in and whispered, "I don't think you're ready to hear this today." And that was it. He led me out of the hall, not abruptly, not to shame me, just a quiet redirection. He handed me a different recording, an older one, something familiar, and a phrase I'll never forget. "Let this one rinse the dust off first. Then we'll go deeper." That was the first day I realized something. Even my ability to listen was theirs to decide. And oddly, beautifully, I welcomed it. Because that meant I didn't have to judge myself anymore. Didn't have to measure my own readiness. Didn't have to push when I didn't understand. Someone else could read my soul, and they knew better than I did when to open which doors. I began to wait for cues like that. If a lesson felt heavy, I'd look to him. If he nodded, I pressed through. If he tilted his head, I lowered mine. Some might call that dependence. I called it being guided. I was no longer fumbling, no longer alone in the dark. Every choice, every intake of thought, of information, of feeling, was filtered for me. And once that filter was in place, I found I didn't miss the mess. There was something else, too, subtler, but real. I stopped needing to know things. I used to crave knowledge, devour books, ask questions. But knowledge came with weight, with tension. And now, when I felt that tension, I had a tool. All I had to ask myself was, am I seeking this because I'm empty or because I'm resisting? That question, taught to us as a kind of mental checkpoint, became a gate I rarely crossed. Because every time I truly looked inside, I saw the same answer. You're seeking because you want control. And if I wanted control, then I wasn't ready yet. So I stopped seeking. And in that quiet, something like peace began to bloom. I remember one conversation with him that still echoes. We were seated beneath the cedar trees after evening reflections. He was quiet, he always was. But there was something heavier in the air, not sadness, just stillness. I asked him softly, "How do you know what I'm ready for?" He turned, not surprised, and said, "Because I watch what you resist. And when you stop resisting, you're ready." That sentence stayed in me. It grew roots, because it meant that my own tension, my own discomfort, wasn't weakness. It was simply misalignment, a signal that I hadn't fully released yet, that my inner hands were still trying to hold something. And so, I learned to let go faster, to not argue, to not explain, to feel the tug of disagreement, and open my hands instead. Over time, the resistance stopped visiting at all. The last time I remember making a decision for myself was a rainy morning. I woke up before the knock. He hadn't come. I waited, listening for the rhythm, but it never arrived. And something strange happened. I didn't know what to do. Not in a dramatic way, not panic, just stillness, blankness. As if the part of me that used to fill in those gaps had gone quiet. So I sat on my mat, waiting. Eventually, he came in, unannounced this time, and said simply, "You did well. You waited." And that felt like praise, like I'd passed a test I didn't know I was taking. From that day on, I stopped waking up with questions, because there was always someone else who knew what I should hear, what I should say, what I should feel, and letting them know was easier than trying to know myself. Somewhere along the way, I stopped using the word I. It wasn't a rule. No one banned it, but it felt clumsy, loud, heavy. We said things like, "This body is ready. There is joy in this experience. Clarity is present." And at first, it felt silly, forced. But with repetition, it became clean, almost elegant. Removing I removed the struggle, the burden of ownership, the burden of choosing. Because once there's no I, there's no one left to argue, and that was what they called freedom. I started to enjoy the moments when I had nothing to say. There used to be so much noise in me, thoughts, memories, questions that looped and twisted and collided like birds trapped indoors. But now, there was space. Wide, clear, undisturbed. They taught us to sit in silence with open hands, palms facing the sky, not as a symbol, but as readiness. And at first it felt performative. But over time, I began to feel it, that genuine openness, that trust that someone else, someone wiser, would place into those hands exactly what was meant to be held, not more, not less. And because of that, I didn't need to grasp anymore. There was a moment, one that comes back to me often now, when someone new arrived. Young, unsure, jittery like I used to be. They sat across from me during morning tea and whispered, "How do you know what to think here?" And I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I remembered the ache of that question, the exhaustion of trying to be certain. I didn't give him advice, I just said, You won't have to know. That's the gift." He looked confused, but I didn't explain, because I knew, in time, he'd feel it too. That soft relief. That moment when someone else decides the shape of your day, and you no longer feel the need to resist it. I remember the last time I hesitated. It was nothing big, just a passing thought. I saw a bird through the window, a dove or something close to it, and a memory rose up from nowhere, a garden, my mother's voice, my name. It hovered for a second, like the fog drifting through an open door, and for the briefest moment I wanted to hold it, to ask, was that real? Was that mine? But then I heard footsteps, someone approaching for the midday assignment, and as quickly as the memory had come, I let it dissolve. Because what was the point? Whatever that name had once been, whatever that version of me had once wanted, he had never found peace. But I had. Here. In the not knowing. In the not choosing. In the stillness that followed surrender. People think surrender is a one-time thing. That you break once, fall to your knees, and it's done. But it's slower than that. It's in the mornings you don't reach for control. In the questions you stop asking. In the books you don't open. In the emotions you pause before feeling and wait for someone else to approve. Surrender isn't loud. It's a quiet, daily decision to not decide, and eventually that choice becomes your rhythm, and then your rhythm becomes you. Sometimes I wonder, if I ever left, would I know how to start again? Would I be able to pick a meal, choose a song? Would I know what I actually feel? Or just wait for someone to name it for me? But then I catch myself. That's old thinking. That's the language of autonomy, of chaos. And I'm not there anymore. I'm here, where stillness has structure, where permission is peace, where I don't have to carry the burden of self. They once told us, a person truly free does not ask what they want. They listen for what they're ready to receive. And I believed that. I still do. Because over time my mind became clearer without preference. My body moved more gently without urgency. And my soul, if that's what you'd call the space inside, stopped trying to speak louder than theirs. I was no longer drowning in myself. I was quiet, present, aligned. Sometimes, when I sit alone now, by firelight or by the small window in my quarters, I try to remember what it felt like to make my own choices. And the truth is, I don't. I don't remember what hunger felt like before someone told me what I was ready to taste. I don't remember what grief felt like before someone confirmed it was mine. I don't remember what joy felt like without permission. And that should scare me, it should, but it doesn't. It calms me. Because the longer I live like this, the more I believe. Maybe I was never meant to carry the weight of deciding. Maybe the deepest kind of freedom is obedience. And I know how that sounds, but I also know how it feels. Stillness, softness, relief. I don't know when I stopped making decisions, but I remember exactly when it started to feel good.